Hi, I'm Shosh, and I am a prospective candidate for the librarian position here at St. Ambrose. Thank you for having me. Currently, I am a student at Drexel University pursuing my master's degree in library and information science. I have also spent the past year working at the Davenport Public Library, primarily at the front desk, assisting patrons with their information and research needs. Today, I'm going to be speaking about assessing student learning and outcomes. In my talk, I will explore why assessment is important, how St. Ambrose currently assesses their student learning and outcome, and what are some ways that assessments could be more effective in understanding the long-term effects of information literacy instruction. So, as your mission tells us, the St. Ambrose Library exists to select, organize, and maintain resources that support the curriculum and information needs of the campus. Further, and most important to my talk today, is that you aim to contribute to the educational mission of St. Ambrose by teaching information literacy, strategies for independent learning, and also providing an environment that encourages study and growth. The instruction that you provide during your information literacy instruction is a key component of this goal. But how do you know if your instruction is actually providing those strategies for independent learning? How do you know or determine that students are actually utilizing the information that they learned in the class? The answer is assessment. So assessment is not just important for studying the effectiveness of literary or library instruction programs. It's important to administration, it's important to accreditation agencies, and it's also really important to students since valid assessments provide better teaching, which in turn prepares students for academic achievement. Proving that your program is successfully arming students with the information literacy skills they need to succeed at school and in the world beyond is a great way of remaining relevant in the eyes of administration and also showing accreditation agencies that you are succeeding at your endeavors. I know that assessment is very important to you, but you have also expressed concern about the results of recent assessments and question whether it is the course material or the method of assessment that is producing results that are less than desirable. Your course material has changed drastically over the past few years, but the way that you assess this learning has not. So a brief overview of why assessment is important. According to the ACRL, assessment is essential to monitor effectiveness for accountability, better identify instructional practices, evaluate the effectiveness of these practices, measure student achievement, and evaluate students' mastery of skills. Your current assessment program is comprised of a pre-test before the course begins and then a post-test right after the course has been completed. There is also satisfaction survey that is completed and portfolio. Now, the test uses the 5 standards and 22 performance indicators provided by ACRL's competency standards to determine information literacy competency. These 3 methods can provide good feedback about the class, but might also have little to do with the long-term learning that information literacy programs are providing. The ACRL actually says that satisfaction surveys and portfolios may not be the best way to assess student learning and may need to be tested for validity. The pre and post test that you offer focuses on performance indicators in a way that removes them from context and presents them more as individual learning points. How effective is your assessment if it only measures the knowledge of a concept and not knowledge of the use of that concept or how to use it? How do we improve this assessment process? First, I suggest more contextualized evaluations. We need to see if students are not only learning information literacy, but learning how to utilize what they have learned. Are they just repeating back facts, or do they know how to critically apply the information? Marya Carncross suggests that breaking away from the ACRL competency standards might be a good first step. She provides a framework for information literacy for higher education, which primarily focuses on the importance of context surrounding information and research, but she doesn't really give a means to apply her approach. I think working to develop an assessment that can measure outcomes and learning in a more contextualized manner will give a better idea of the success of your information literacy programs. Assessments that are discipline specific might be helpful in seeing how skills are transferred from one class to another. Assessments that measure outcomes that are relevant to students' learning careers is another way to make sure that we are effectively measuring learning. Approaching assessments with this in mind, according to Eric Ackerman, places a higher value on contextualized critical thinking and a lesser value on decontextualized skills. Second, I think that St. Ambrose needs to conduct additional studies after the original pre and post tests of the information literacy program to see how students are retaining and using information in their later school years. Are they using the library more after information literacy courses? And if not, why? We need to ask more specific questions about library use and how exposure to material during their information literacy course has been helpful to them during their time at school. On the same note, evaluating students after graduation may be another way to measure the effectiveness of library instruction during these early college years. It's a more challenging way to assess learning and outcomes, but could provide valuable information about the long-term effects of information literacy course. St. Ambrose could conduct a study similar to one that Cornell did in the early 90s that surveyed graduates of the college to see what they had retained from their information literacy course and what they found most important in their jobs that they had learned. They also talked to employers of graduates to see what the most desired information literacy skills were in entry-level positions. While the study is older, I believe that it could provide valuable lessons that are relevant today. Lloyd and Williamson tell us that in higher education, information literacy is conceived as a set of competencies framed in terms of generic graduate outcomes. But in reality, generalizations from this research don't necessarily reflect the realities of the experience and use of information in those texts. It's not really telling you how students are using these in their lives, using these literacy skills in their lives. Third, and this point really leads back to the first point I made about providing context for assessments. Better communication with teachers. I know that St. Ambrose librarians currently have a wonderful relationship with faculty, but I think that there needs to not just be discussion about the kinds of things that professors would like you to cover in your information literacy classes, but also what they've observed about the information competency of students after information literacy courses. Ackerman tells us that disciplines have different terminology to describe components of inquiry skills. Communication with faculty will ensure that assessments are being presented in a way that are relevant to disciplines. Rubrics for assessment that are discipline neutral can only provide general data, but discipline-specific assessments give greater insight into research habits and how effectively students can evaluate materials and use them in that discipline. Anne Grafstein shows us that critical thinking needs to be developed with a thorough knowledge of the characteristics and needs of the discipline in which one is working. There should be no one single set of standards applied to assessments, but possibly many depending on each discipline. Collaboration with faculty will ensure that information literacy crosses all disciplines and communities. So, more contextualized assessments, additional evaluations after the initial ones after the information literacy course is taken, and more communication about how information literacy is being utilized in disciplines, more communications with professors to talk about this. I think that these three ways are a great start to improving the assessment process to better understand the outcomes of student learning and outcomes. Thank you. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to discussing these ideas with you further.